This pile of boards used to be a play set. Let me show you how I turned this backyard eyesore into a beautiful raised garden bed. The Wood Whisperer is sponsored by Woodcraft. Just get started. This playground came with the house that we bought a few years ago, and it was pretty sketchy even back then. I'd estimate it's at least 10 years old, and while it's technically still standing, a strong breeze just might be its undoing. I stepped on a ladder rung while filming this and immediately regretted it. Yeah, it's time. Now, I already had it in my plans this year to make at least 1 or 2 raised garden beds, and I really wasn't looking forward to purchasing good material to do that job. Well, when this thing came down, I quickly thought, hey, why aren't we just repurposing some of this material? Sure, it's a lot of work, but it's free. The thing that occurred to me though is, what if this is pressure treated material or some kind of treatment was done to it that might not make it ideal to, number 1, work with in my shop, and number 2, to have in a bed of vegetables. So I did a little bit of research. I contacted the company. Thankfully, this company, it's been passed around a few times, but there was someone to speak to, and they said, especially going back at least a decade, even then, they were using solid cedar, and the only thing they would do to treat it was to give it a water-based sealer before it would go out to the customer. So if that's true, I think we're in pretty good shape. Now, I don't trust the word of someone I just got on the phone, so I'm gonna check this stuff out myself. And I actually quickly cleaned up one of the pieces. Sure smells like cedar, it looks like cedar, and I don't have any indication that there's been any kind of treatment. A lot of times if you do something like this and you clean the surface, you might see like a green hue or a tinge to the wood. I don't see any of that. I don't smell anything weird. I actually think we've got the green light to try to make something out of this. It might be a bit of a Frankenstein project, but I think it'll be worth it. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This stuff is in rough shape. There are hidden pieces of metal and broken fasteners throughout. The thicker pieces are actually delaminating, and some pieces are just too far gone. I've got my work cut out for me, and I think this project calls for a new tool. I am now the proud new owner of a sweet, cheap Chinese-made metal detector. And by the way, they would like to softly remind, please charge the metal detector if you cannot power on it. Hang on, what is this? Kidding me? Well, there goes my plans for the day. So the disassembly was interesting. While this particular part had some boards that were in really good shape, the cross pieces were held in with screws. Old, weathered, rusty screws. So it left me with no choice but to pry them off. Some screws were, as my stepdad would have said, crooked as a dog's hind leg. Other screws, where the head broke off, required some vice grips for removal. And then there were the screws where the head was stripped but also buried in the wood. For those, I just did what I had to do. And finally, there were a bunch more that could only be found using the Jedi metal detector, and then I used the nail set to pound them through. Yes, I know that's actually a file, but I'm pretending it's a nail set. You should too. So now I'll work on the pieces with the pig snouts on them. These were held on with larger bolts and were pretty easy to remove. Yard juice and bugs. One of the bolts was held in with a T-nut, so those are easy enough to pop out. So now I have a pretty good pile of thinner stock ready to go. So let's move on to the big boys. The ends of the longer posts were near the ground and were pretty beat up from years of weed whacking.
Ooh, it's a long one. That's what she said.
So I just chopped those off with my comically long jigsaw blade. I also removed any spots that were too far gone to be useful. For boards this long, I actually need to open the garage doors so I have enough room to pass them through the planer. Small shop problems, am I right? At this point, I'm really just trying to determine what we have to work with here by peeling off the top layers. since pretty much all of these thicker boards are just a lamination of skinnier boards, all of them are starting to separate at the glue joint, so I decided to simply resaw them along that line, giving me 2 long boards that I can use for the garden bed. This is the point where I usually drop in some pithy remark, but I'll keep my thoughts to myself. I was pretty pleased at this point to see just how much usable lumber was stacking up. That's a good sign. Most of the boards were remarkably flat, but I still thought it would be smart to go through the whole jointing and planing rigmarole. Oh look, a full dustbin. You know, there are a lot of things that I miss about having my brother-in-law Jason working with me. This is by far the thing I miss the most. He was absolutely diligent about dumping the dustbin. But as you can see, I'm trying to choke out most of the poison ivy in favor of a nice condominium for rats. And back to planing. I'm not really aiming for any particular thickness or width here, I'm just getting the wood cleaned up and consistent, and the dimensions end up where they end up.
Alright, so now I've got a much better idea of what we have. This stack right here are 16 pieces. They're all about the same length, roughly in that 4-foot range, and they are the same width. So with 16, I could take 4 each and then have 4 sides for this thing. So I can make at least one rough 4x4 bed. It's going to bring me about to 20 inches because these are 5-inch boards. Each side has 4. It's going to be about 20 inches high, and I think that's pretty decent depth to start with. Now these other pieces, it's a little bit more confusing. Most of what I have here are the narrower pieces like this, so I got a whole bunch of them grouped together, and these are the longer versions, roughly about 6 foot. So if I put 5 together, that's a long side. Here's another 5, that's a long side. So I need to come up with the short side to accompany these, and I think I'll be able to get that out of this material here. But you see, I've got a mix of widths and lengths here, so it may seem a little bit wasteful, but I think I'm gonna need to cut some of these down in width to match the other sizes, because again, joinery, you're gonna see what I do for that later, but I need them to be just like these. And since these are now the short sides, some of these are gonna wind up getting cut to length. But ultimately, I'm getting 2 beds out of this thing, which is more than I thought I would get, so I can't complain. Now I was about to jump into the glue up of these boards so that we can make the 4 separate panels for each bed, and then I thought of an opportunity for some style points, and I realized this is just a raised garden bed, but why make something that looks like everybody else's if you can make a little bit of a change, a little tweak, and then suddenly it looks much more visually interesting. That's what I'm hoping for here. So let me show you what I have in mind. When we do our glue up, if we simply stagger these like so, we can create very simple finger joints that are really gonna make this thing pop. Now here is a piece that kind of represents how the other side would join in. And you could have it flush, but I think it actually is gonna look way better if it sits a little bit proud, right? So we would have a little proud finger here, proud finger there. That's gonna look awesome. It's so much more dimension and just looks so much cooler. And it's not that hard to do. So all I'm really gonna do here is use this little jig that I made up. That's gonna set my depth at 1.5 inches, because I know this piece is 1.25 inches. So that gives me a little bit of a reveal there, right? So we'll use this for each one of the glue ups. And before I do the glue up, I'm gonna add a round over to all of the pieces that are protruding, right? And it's just critical that we make sure that each glue up is done in such a way that we end up with the male and the female parts in the right place. It's very important to get them in the right place. Yeah. I ran out of time yesterday, just not enough hours in the day. So I didn't get the short ones done, but I can get these out of the clamps now, put them on the side. Now, I didn't have it happen here, but something that can happen with soft wood species like this, when you glue it together, it introduces a lot of moisture and you get a little bit of expansion. So you might come back the next day and find that your clamps are actually a little bit loose because everything evaporated and it shrunk down just a little bit. Didn't happen here, but if it ever does happen, that's what's going on. Oh. Cat, you need to get off my feet. All right. I should probably mention something about the adhesive that we're using. Titebond, of course, they're a sponsor of the show, but this stuff is just, it's kind of the go-to when you're doing something for water exposure. So it's waterproof. It's also FDA approved for indirect food contact. So you certainly have a range of glues that you could use for this, but this is just my go-to when I'm doing anything for outside. And one of the big sort of like failure points in raised garden beds is going to be the seams between boards. And a lot of times folks just grab construction lumber or some kind of material where they're just putting the boards together and stacking them and then bracing them in the corners to hold them together. They're not really gluing them together. So my hope here is that these will hold up pretty well because we are gluing the seams. There is no space for water to kind of find its way into, which is how these things start to rot. And just a little tip for you, if you're gluing up a panel like this, that's a lot of joints, and they want to slip and slide past one another. Go slow with your clamping. Try to clamp a little bit on each clamp as you go. Push down with your fingers on the seams, and make sure they're sitting nice and flat. Tight up against the bar of your clamp, and introduce a little bit more pressure as you go. It's slowly bringing that in, getting the squeeze out to happen, getting all the air out of the joint, that gets you to a point where those pieces then grip one another. Once they grip, then it doesn't slip as much. But until that point, they are very slippery. So we're kind of easing our way into it. You could start to see the glue squeezing out a little bit at a time. And short of that, you could use cauls or something like that. A lot of times, if it's critical, I would use dowels or dominoes or biscuits to hold these pieces together so they don't slip. But in this case, just not critical that it be perfect. But we can get pretty darn close with slow incremental clamping pressure increases like this. All right, so while my side panels are drying, I'm looking at the long panels here, and there are just a lot of holes. So one thing I'm trying to prevent is infiltration of water into places where it can just kind of stay, and it allows mold and fungus to thrive. And that's the stuff that will, over time, break this down. So this is a very rot-resistant wood to begin with, but I think we can extend the life a little bit more by taking a couple of extra precautions and filling those holes. So what do you fill it with? Well, that's a bit of a touchy subject. It depends on your opinion, your tolerance for what chemicals might be leaching into the soil if they do at all. I'm just going to play it safe with this, right? So I want to fill them with epoxy, but I don't necessarily want the epoxy to have direct contact with the soil. So what I'm going to do is fill from the outside. I don't mind if I see an epoxy fill from the outside. On the inside, I have to make sure that that epoxy doesn't leak through because these are through holes. They're bolt holes. So I've got to, kind of block it up anyway. Well, why not just use a little scrap of the Western red cedar, block the hole from the inside, and then fill it from the other side. In this way, I just have wood to soil contact, and I can feel better about it. Also, I'm fully aware of the redness on my neck, and you might see it on my arm. I get poison ivy so easy, and I get it every year, multiple times. So that's what's going on. Do you know what I'm making here? Do you know what these are?
Wood.
A better question for you.
It's wood.
It is wood, but do you know where this wood came from? What did we do in the backyard recently?
Oh, the playground.
This is the playground.
It looks nice.
It looks nicer, doesn't it? See, we're down there. That's the old stuff. Pretty cool, right? To be able to recycle it like that? Yeah. You want to eat lunch now? All right, let's eat lunch. Okay. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I don't really want to take the time to put clamps on these things, but I want a nice, good quality, waterproof permanent bond. So I'm going to use my Titebond 3. That's for the long-term bond. But in the short term, I'm going to use a little bit of Type Bond Instant Bond, and that's going to help hold it in place. A little bit of activator, and I'm going to press this guy down like so. And within a few seconds, it's going to grip. And then over time, the Type Bond 3 will dry. It's not going anywhere now, so I'll just continue everywhere there's a hole that I plan on filling from the other side. All right, so to do the fill, I'm just going to use some epoxy here. This is Total Boat's High Performance, and with these little pumps, it makes it super easy to get a perfect ratio. Now I'm going to need more than this initial amount, but I'm just going to show you how we mix it up. I will be adding some high density filler. This epoxy is very runny, so adding this stuff, just like a little fine powder, will definitely give us something that's a little bit thicker, won't run as much. Don't want to breathe that crap in. I like to stir it pretty slowly until it's incorporated so we're not kicking up a bunch of dust. Okay, so that's a little thicker than we want it, but I knew I was going to be adding more anyway, so. Now, it'll kind of get this creamy color to it. I want something a little bit darker than that, especially if I'm going to end up seeing it. I like to use trans tint for something like this. You can't use too much. Too much, you can actually goof up your formula and it may not cure properly. There's probably better tints to use, but that's what I've always got on hand. This is a dark mission brown, and as you can see, it very quickly turns it into a brown color, which I think is fine. And now we could just pour into the holes. So I don't know about you guys, but I've noticed I make weird mouth movements when I'm doing stuff like this. I have to actively like bite my lip to stop looking like stupid. I don't know why I do it. It's something I used to do all the time when I would play the drums. I think my body gets so focused on the task that the hands and feet are doing that it forgets to hold my jaw up. And I would kind of go slack-jawed. There's pictures of me drumming out there that aren't my favorites. So, you know, there's something I've been thinking about with the top of these raised beds. If you're sitting on this thing, which is something you would tend to do if you're tending to the stuff in the garden, and sitting on that 1 1/4 inch thick piece of wood, isn't that comfortable on the butt? So I've seen some designs where they actually make like a mitered frame on the top that's like a horizontal piece, you know, no wider than something like this, that allows you to have something much more comfortable to sit on. And I think that's going to not only be functional, but it's definitely going to make it look even better, make it look a little bit more finished. The problem is I'm looking at the material that I have left. Nothing is the proper length to span the length of our sides. And it's got to go a little longer than the sides, right? So I'm going to do something that I really normally would never do, like in a piece of fine furniture, but for a raised garden bed, I think it's fine. I have plenty of shorter pieces like this, and I would love to use this stock, but I need 2 longer pieces. So the way we're going to do this is with a bit of a board stretcher technique. I'm just going to do a half lap on each of these pieces, join them together, and there's going to be a cross-grain glue joint. Who cares? As long as it's strong enough to do the job, then we'll be able to get the final length and cut the miters on the ends. If I had long enough pieces, I wouldn't bother with this, but this is what we got, and I'm kind of determined to only use material from the play center to incorporate in this thing. So, right, you can see these 2 pieces just come together like so. Looking for them to be nice and flush. Close enough. Close enough for what we're doing here. And I'm just going to use my workbench. I want to make sure these pieces are not only nice and tight here, but that we're not kind of inducing some kind of an angle like that. So I'm using the front edge of my workbench as just a straight reference. And we can clamp that sucker right down. Good deal. Just like that. Longboard. This is my counter height bar stool, and it's the latest course that we've added to the Wood Whisperer Guild. This project has it all: elegant curves, eye-catching joinery, sleek brass accents, and a durable woven seat that's as comfortable as it is beautiful. Along the way, we'll dive into material selection, working with templates, building custom template sleds, mastering advanced domino joinery, shaping graceful curves, applying brass details, and weaving a supportive seat that'll hold up for years. The best part? You can mix and match wood species and webbing material to create a version that fits your home and personality. So come along for the ride and let's build a bar stool that's anything but basic. You can get more details at thewoodwhispererguild.com. So let's talk a little bit about finish. Now's a good time to pre-finish these panels because everything is nice and flat. It's so much easier to do it now than after assembly. But we do have a lot to talk about. I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible. Two concerns. One is the outside, one is the inside. Now on the inside, we have soil contact, we have constant moisture, and we could potentially leach chemicals into the soil that get into the food, right? That's no bueno. So what I'm going to use is a non-toxic finish that is, as I understand it, kind of like a bit of a rubberized, waxy material. Something that you might use on a post that gets buried in the ground, right? But it is non-toxic and that's on order. I don't have it yet. It's probably going to be pretty boring to apply, so we'll deal with that when it comes in. For the exterior though, you're pretty much, sky's the limit. Whatever you like on exterior furniture is something you could certainly use because it's not going to contact the soil. We can get some clues by looking at the original stuff. I believe this was just a water-based sealer with a little bit of color and UV inhibitor that made it that kind of dark red color, and it was never applied again. So over time, it wore through, and then you have nature making contact with the wood, and it gets nice and gray. So with a wood like this, it is rot resistant. Technically, you don't need any finish at all, but at least some finish will slow down that process and slow down the absorption of moisture and allow this stuff to last maybe a little bit longer. And frankly, I think it looks a little bit better. I don't love the weathered gray look, but if you're into that, you don't have to use any finish at all. But if you do, I think it's going to extend the beauty of this thing. And keep in mind, even as ugly as this looked, with the exception of the pieces that were rotted, this is really just skin deep, which is amazing to me. That's a joy of using a rot-resistant species in the first place. What am I going to use? Well, I can tell you what I'm not going to use: a film. Right? I've got a video out there that shows projects that I've made in the past and how well they've held up with the various types of finishes available out there. And you can make a choice for yourself. That's the point of that video, not to tell you what to use, but to look at your situation and decide which result you want to see based on the kind of maintenance you want to do. In this case, I want a fairly low maintenance situation, but if I don't get a chance to, address it if it needs some finish, I don't want it to look awful. So that's why I'm not using a film, because a film will always lose the battle against Mother Nature. And eventually, if left untreated and left unmaintained, it will peel and it will look like hot garbage. And I don't like the way that looks, right? You absolutely must address it once it starts to flake because it just looks awful. So I'm going with a non-film finish, stuff I've been using in the past. In fact, I have a video showing how to apply this Rubio Duro Grit. This is not sponsored, by the way. I paid for this can. And the reason I'm using this, even though I don't totally love the color, is because it's almost full and I'm not gonna go buy another can. Plus I've made a table that has this stuff on it and this kind of matches. So it's not the end of the world, it's just a little bit brighter orange red than I really like. But this stuff does have wood fibers in it that stop the UV. Like they use the wood fibers as a UV blocker. Very easy to apply with a brush. And then if I let it go over time, it's not gonna peel, it's not gonna flake. And if I really just want to spruce the thing up, I can apply some more finish, right? That's the finish in a nutshell. Use whatever makes the most sense for you. This is what makes sense for me.
While the finish dries, I'm going to turn my attention to making the top frame. I'm just going with simple miter joints.
right, there are the 4 pieces for the frame. This thing is huge. It's bigger than my assembly table. If this was even larger, I might have to do this on the floor, but I think I'll be able to pull it off here. My primary concern are the miter joints. Miter joints just in general are not the strongest joint in the world. It's kind of partial end grain to end grain. So some kind of reinforcement is called for, especially something that's going outside. If we don't do that, we're going to wind up having those pieces kind of mismatch one another. There's going to be a ledge that's going to form and maybe even separation. So we will do some kind of joinery. I think dowels are going to be a good choice here. They're quick, they're easy, they're incredibly strong, and I think it's perfect for this application. Now, I'm going to use a jig, but I do want to point out that if you don't have a jig, first, you can make one out of wood if you want to, or you could use these little dowel centers. So essentially, you drill your holes in the locations you want on one piece, you pop these guys in there, and then you bring your 2 work pieces together, press them. It makes an indentation to show you where to drill on the other side. It works fine. It's just going to be a little bit, not as good as something that is rigid like a jig. So this Jessam stainless steel version here is, top of the line stuff, but it's what I've got. And I really do like using a jig for applications like this. So I'm going to use this guy. I'm going to mark on this piece some references that let me know these pieces are the ones that always go together. So I'll put the letter A on that, and I'll put B, C, and D on the other corners. And then all I'm really going to do here is clamp this guy in place. I'm going to line up with a consistent reference point each time, which would be the end of the corner here. Clamp it down and then drill. The one thing to keep in mind with the miter though is you got to watch the depth of your dowel that you don't want to punch through. So anything toward the outside edge, we're probably going to lay off of that. Or you have to go with a shorter dowel. In this case, I think we might be able to get 3 of them from the inside. We just can't go much further than that point there with the last one. You see how fast that is? It's nice. And 3 should be plenty strong. Now, as long as you always use the same reference surfaces for your fence and your alignment points, they'll be in the perfect spot on each one of these pieces. So it's kind of why I like using a jig. There you go. All right, so before doing the final assembly, I will kind of pre-glue these dowels into 1/2 of the joint. And not a ton of glue is really needed. It's a snug fit. I just want to coat the walls just enough to hold that dowel in place. And then this way, half of the joint is already glued up when I go to do the assembly. Now I'm actually anticipating this to be a little bit trickier than it might first appear, so hopefully everything goes okay. To clamp this guy together, I'm going to use this Merrill clamp. I've used this on many, many projects, smaller projects. It does say that it goes up to 69 by 69 inches, so if we do the math on that, that is within the range of what this thing is going to be. So let's see if there's enough strapping in here to pull that off. Looks like it might make it. All right, wish me luck. I do wish I had another person here. Time is of the essence here, so I'm going to be pretty sloppy with the application of the glue. All right, one side has got to hang off the edge no matter what we do. Oops. I actually just noticed one of my corners is not totally closing up, so I got a little pipe clamp here. It's gonna hopefully give it just enough pressure. Okay, that should be good. All right, so after the glue dried, I gave it a light sanding and just kind of hit the edges with an 1/8 inch round over bit just to ease the surface here. This is a surface we might come in contact with our hands, so making it feel good is important. Next thing we need to do is apply some more of this stuff. All right, looking pretty good. Just gonna let this dry overnight. So the next step is we are going to glue our sides together. Before we do that though, we're gonna play a little game. It's a game of what happens when you have finish on a surface and then you try to glue those surfaces together. Now we always say that you wanna keep finish off of a glue surface because you want the glue to bond to the wood fibers, and that's really what gives you the most strength. But what happens if you get a little finish on it? What happens if you get a finish that still allows the wood to breathe? Or maybe a finish that's not totally cured yet when you glue those pieces together. I don't think this is a black and white thing. I think it's definitely on a scale, right? So what I did was I took some test pieces because I wanted to see for myself. I finished them the same way that I finished my parts in this project, and then I glued those pieces together overnight. And now we're gonna see if there's any inherent weakness in that joint. This is not a definitive test. This is just me having fun and maybe making myself feel a little bit better. But let's see what happened. Got the perfect hammer for this thing too. Chris Schwarz gave this to me. If I were betting on this, I would bet the joint is gonna hold up fine and we're gonna get a split right above or right below the joint. Probably right above the joint with the way this is being held in. But let's go, baby. Shit. Well, color me surprised. I didn't expect that result, but this was incredibly informative. It tells us, number one, that the finish is fairly effective. It's actually blocking enough moisture that the water-based glue was not able to do its job as effectively as it normally would. It also tells us that we may not want to just glue our joints together. Now the thing is, when I see people make raised garden beds, typically they're just using home store lumber, they're not gluing anything together, and they're just using screws. So I think in my approach, I've got interlocking fingers. I am going to use glue, which still has some value, not as much as I thought, but some value. And if I use screws on top of that, we're going to have a bulletproof assembly. So I don't think we're going to have any problems, but this definitely informs my decision and lets me know that those screws are more important than I thought they were going to be. And by the way, I hope this encourages you to do similar things. You can hear some ding-dong like me on YouTube telling you something, but until you go into the shop and test it for yourself, that's the real data point, and that's where the magic happens. And that's where you can also judge the information you're getting from people online, because most of them are just regurgitating stuff they heard from someone else on YouTube. All right, so finally, the product arrived. And I want to smack myself for saying that. We've gotten so spoiled with the way that Amazon ships these days that if I have to wait 3 days, it seems like forever. Anyway, that's a me problem. This stuff is non-toxic. We're going to use this on the insides. Going to apply it with a brush and a roller, primarily the roller, but I think with all the little patches that I made, it's going to be easier to get around that stuff with a brush. So I got both of those here, and all we got to do, shake this sucker. It's very thin. Kind of expected it to be a little bit thicker based on the way people described it, but it's like water. If I were doing this on a visible surface in the final product, I might be a little bit more careful about my approach here, but all I'm looking to do right now is get coverage. I just want this evenly coated. So if it's a little bit messy and I'm not going in any particular direction, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This stuff is juicy. And I don't even know if I'm going to need the brush the way it's going around these obstacles. Well, that was easy peasy. So I'm ready to assemble, and I've been given the situation just a little bit more thought. I really don't want to use screws on this, and it's not a pride thing. It's simply that I don't want to make holes on the outside of this finger joint design, because then you just see those circles. Even if I patch them, we've already got finish on the exterior, so I would have to put a little patch in there, a little plug, and then flush it up and then apply some more finish there. So if I could figure out a way to do this without hardware, that's great. Worst case scenario, if I have to add hardware later, so be it. I'll do what I have to do. So how am I getting around this issue knowing that there's a little bit of finish on these fingers here? Well, one thing I could do is sand or scrape away the finish and any sealer that got there, expose fresh wood fibers. And the good thing is here, these are pretty tight joints. That actually would work pretty well. It might be a little bit inexact. We might end up with some gaps here and there, but getting the finish off and then maybe removing a little bit of wood will make these fingers, come together a little bit easier. You're gonna see when I do it in a minute, I'm gonna have a little bit of trouble because I'm going with plan B. I'm not gonna remove anything from there, but I am gonna change the adhesive I'm gonna use. I'm just gonna use epoxy. Epoxy works pretty well for outdoor projects and it doesn't have any water in it. So one of the problems with a water-based glue in a situation like this where the joinery is already tight, water-based glue, water plus wood, the wood can swell a little bit while you're doing the assembly, making assembly really, really hard. So I've just got a little bit of epoxy, a little bit of that filler added to it, and I'm gonna do my best to get these things together. It's kind of nice about epoxy as well as it's a gap filling adhesive. So if we have some gaps, and inevitably we probably will, it can fill that gap, sealing it off from moisture. And who knows, after this thing gets together and the glue dries, I may decide to throw the screws in there anyway. I just really don't want to ruin the visuals that we work so hard for here. So assembly here can be a little bit tricky. I've got the longer piece down. Take the shorter side and just bring these two pieces together. No, that wasn't bad at all. That epoxy, I swear, works like a lubricant. Without water in there, it helps these joints just really slide together. Okay, come up right now. Oh, heck yeah. So with the extra working time afforded by the epoxy, I'm gonna move on with the other two pieces and see if we can't get this all glued up in one shot. And you'll have to forgive me at this point. I don't have a cameraman. And in the middle of a glue up like this, you guys know how it can be. Things can get a little bit frantic, so you may not have the best view. And my apologies for that. I mean, I do have a cameraman, but he's our videographer and editor that lives in Texas, and he videos everybody but me. It's a real bummer. Talking to you, Todd. Interesting bit of information. If you were to try this kind of a joinery method that we did here, where you cut the pieces all to the same width and then just kind of glue them together and the joints just miraculously fit perfect. If you tried that with a regular hardwood, it's not gonna work. A lot of people don't realize that most joints have at least a few thousandths of slop in them. So if I were doing this out of like a regular hardwood, you probably would want each joint to have maybe 5 thousandths slop, something like that, to allow them to fit together. You cut them to the exact same size, they're never going together. On something like this is a much softer species, we can get away with it. All right, since I got it together, there is no reason I shouldn't add clamps at this point, as long as I have clamps long enough. Oh man, I get to use Grandpa's clamps. I may have told this story before, but my grandfather was not a woodworker. He liked to fish and owned a fishing tackle shop in Trenton, New Jersey. And for some reason, he had these clamps. So at some point after he passed and I started woodworking, they became mine, and I kind of got some new pipes and painted the clamps a little bit just because they were really rusty and gross. And it's been like a really cool thing to have. It's just I don't use them that often. I don't have a reason to all that often. So it's always cool when I get to pull these out. Here's another kind of clamp I don't see very often, but boy am I glad that I've got it when I need it. All right, and I'm really just kind of putting the clamps wherever I see it needs it. I definitely don't have enough clamps to get every single part of these joints perfectly clamped, but I think we're close enough. All right, so the only thing left to do is to check this bad boy for square, and it might be a little bit unruly. Oh, well, that's not bad. I mean, on something like this, it's not super critical, but if you see something that needs adjustment, you're gonna put a little pressure from corner to corner. You have another person around, that's a whole lot easier, but if you're by yourself, you could still just kind of goose it one way or the other. And if you need to, throw a clamp down there on your table. Give it something that you can actually push against and then just push in from the corner. But I think we're actually about where we need to be. Right after I turned the camera off, I had to rearrange my clamps a little bit here and there. I did wind up seeing a gap or two I didn't like, and I'm kind of low on clamps. So my compromise to hold the pieces in place, so basically I would get one corner so it's looking perfect, and then I would pop a couple of brad nails. A brad nail is something that I could easily hide, doesn't do a whole lot of damage. I could fill it afterwards if I need to, but what it does is it kind of acts as a clamp. So that allows me to then lock that one corner in position and take the clamps and then move them to another corner. So I could be a little bit more efficient and get the clamping pressure where I need it, even though I don't have enough long clamps to actually do it all at once, that is. And right now I'm just using a little bit of vinegar on a paper towel to clean up any of the squeeze out that I see from this epoxy. All right, so I let that dry overnight, and now we can bring the top frame in. Just make sure everything looks the way we expect it to. And I'm just looking for a little overhang on the inside, and most of the overhang is on the outside. This should give us a nice platform for my booty when I need to deal with stuff in the garden. Feels pretty good. So I do want to use an adhesive to glue this down. I don't want to put it on there first because then I'm going to be pushing this along. It's going to push the glue all over the place. I think what we could probably do is, now that I have it in place, just kind of bring it up, put the glue on, set it back down, then go to the other side and do the same thing. All right, so once again, Titebond 3, good choice for this. And let's see, I guess I can kind of do half at a time here. Just a nice, generous bead. There's really no opportunity or need to spread it. It'll spread when I bring the frame down. All right, I am not left-handed, so this is getting weird. Now, this glue is important not just as an adhesive to keep the top in place, but it's kind of sealing dead space that could hold moisture. And moisture, moisture that doesn't go away is the enemy here, so. All right. It's looking good. So I've got a square set for my overhang. It's just a little over 1 inch. I'll just go to each corner. Try to get close. Anywhere I can reach, we're going to throw clamps. Over here, can't really get a clamp in there, but I do have another solution. Come here, little guy. Just make sure these are right on the line of the wall, not on the overhang. Okay, let's let that cook. So I'm not sure how much interest you guys have in the details of setting up a new raised garden bed, but it feels kind of weird to skip this step and just show you the finished product. But the reality is, I'm a gardening noob, so I decided to enlist the help of Kevin Espiritu from Epic Gardening. I already watched Kevin's channel, so I had a basic idea of what to do, but I wanted to go to the man himself for the details. So first things first, I needed to know if I should be adding some kind of hardware cloth to prevent critters from burrowing into the garden.
I didn't use it for a while because I thought I'm in San Diego. I don't have a lot of gophers or voles. Turns out I just didn't have a garden yet when I first moved in. So I didn't have the gophers or voles. So now I do, and I wish I had done it. So I would highly recommend doing it. Okay. Hardware cloth, like something. Chicken wire is not enough. They can chew through it sometimes. So hardware cloth is good, which is a weird name. It's much harder than a cloth would imply. But yeah, 1/4 inch hardware cloth I would line the bottom with for sure.
So with the location chosen, I needed to know if I should be pulling up the grass under this bed.
Honestly, if you throw the hardware cloth down, you said it's a 16-inch tall bed, right?
Uh-huh, yep.
If you fill that with soil, it'll smother the grass out, no problem, and it'll actually just break down and build the soil.
Now, even though Kevin said that it's not necessary, I decided to remove most of the grass to help level the bed because this particular part of my yard has a significant slope, so it just seemed like a smart way to level things out. Now, 16-inch bed of this size means there's a lot of space to fill. I asked Kevin how I might be able to fill it in a way that won't require a dump truck full of soil.
In the case of a 16-inch bed, I would probably go with like maybe cardboard on the bottom, do the hardware cloth, and then you could throw like some sticks and twigs and stuff, but I wouldn't be putting like big logs or anything in that because the interface between the soil and wood is a place where nitrogen is actually kind of stolen for a while it's being broken down. And so you want that to be on average below where the roots will end up, which in a tall bed, that's the case. In a shorter bed, like 16 inches, I would try to fill it mostly with good soil. You could say, hey, I am going to cut a sod, but cut it and then just flip it over and put that in the bottom of the bed.
Oh, okay.
Because, of course, that'll guarantee it's pretty much going to die.
Yeah.
And then it'll break down. And since it's very fresh and also very non-woody, it's going to be mostly nitrogen, which is great. And that'll improve the soil.
Once I had the base filled with stuff that should break down over time, I needed to know what kind of soil mix to fill this thing with.
Go buy bulk bags of the qualities a soil needs. So it needs fertility, it needs drainage, and it needs air retention. It needs some ability for air to persist in there. So you would buy something like a third materials of compost like chicken manure, cow manure, that kind of stuff. You'd buy some sort of drainage component like perlite would be something that people will buy. It's kind of like a puffed up volcanic rock. And then you'd buy something to hold the water in, which would be peat moss. A lot of people don't like to use that these days because of sustainability reasons, but it just holds on to water really well. Okay. And then coconut coir is another product. It's sort of like the organic or more sustainable option, shredded coconut husk. So you could do it that way. For a bed of your size, 16 tall, 4x6. So it's a little over 25 cubic feet worth of soil. Most bags of soil are 2 cubic foot. So you'd be buying like 12 bags. In your case, I would try to opt to to get the highest quality mix I could if I had one bed. Because the most important thing is the soil quality. If you were spending money on anything, it should be soil quality. So I would probably try to do that. Now, if you had like 4 of those, that exact same bed, I would call around to like local shops and like local soil mixers and say, hey, can you just deliver a couple yards to my house? And it's amazing. Like you'll pay a couple $100. It isn't that cheap, but it's way cheaper than buying bags and way less labor intensive because you have to shovel it in. And it's really high quality.
So I just want to thank Kevin for that incredibly solid advice. And at this point, my mom and I got things started with a couple of tomato plants and a pepper plant. While I was working, I heard a rustling sound and saw my dog poke her head up out of the fertilizer bag looking like a canine Scarface. A quick call to the vet, and it turns out that she's gonna be fine, but she knows what she did.
You know what you did.
Anyway, pepper plant was replaced and all is well. Now, I could leave it at that and let you think that this is what things look like now. But this is the late summer reality. So here's what happened. The garden started off great. I even added pumpkin and watermelon in spite of knowing that that would overcrowd things. What can I say? I was excited. But then we had rain, like weeks and weeks of rain, and I began to notice some separation in my joints. So I ended up reinforcing those with screws after all. As things progressed, the peppers started to come in first. The tomato plants kept getting taller and taller. We finally had some beautiful cherry tomatoes, but the full-size ones were taking their sweet time. The pumpkin and watermelon started to go nuts, and then I decided to spend 2 weeks in Colorado riding my bike. Totally worth it. But the garden wasn't quite thrilled with me. The tomatoes were falling over and suffocating the peppers. The pumpkin was pretty well ravaged by a squash bug infestation, and the full-size tomatoes suffered from heavy rain and subsequent inconsistent watering. So while these turned out to be the most expensive peppers and tomatoes I've ever eaten, I was able to enjoy the fruits of my labor, and more importantly, I learned a lot. And maybe next year I could recuperate some of my investment, but hey, at least the wood was free. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe. The YouTube gods demand it, and it really helps us out. Thanks again to Kevin, and be sure to check out his channel over at Epic Gardening. Thanks for watching.
Tell me what Dad would say. You be Dad, so talk like me.
Ooga booga.
That's what I would say? I don't think that's what I would say. You're lost for words, aren't you? You have a deer in the headlights look when you see a camera. You just immediately, you're like...
What?
What's something I would say?
Wood.
Wood.
I love wood.
Okay. I want to go bike riding.